Most of us will have been the receiver of strange prophecy in childhood from the adults around us. They warned us to enjoy our childhood whilst we had it, for in adulthood life would become far less carefree and we will wish for the years we lived in blissful ignorance. In a roundabout way, the grown-ups in our lives warned us that as we aged, we would be exposed to more stresses, negativity, worries, ailments, death and pain. In other words, in adulthood, we would suffer more. Now, as we aged, we came to terms with this fate. Our brains developed in a way that we began to understand financial troubles, the economy, war, disease, relationship struggles, losses, mental illness, hatred, violence and inequality. But I believe the sense of nihilism and hopelessness many of us developed over time stemmed not just from our cognitive processing of the horrors of the world around us, but from our internal battle with the cognitive dissonance between reality and the narratives we were told as children. When we were younger, we were taught markers of success and goodness. The characters in the tales we were told started off destitute and starving, but through their good heart and triumph over evil, they were rewarded with treasures, wealth, good fortune, and love. They were the heroes of the stories we were told. But the people who hold the heroic markers in today's world are more often than not far from heroic. Those who have the most power, wealth, influence and popularity very often have such things handed down to them, or earned through ethically contentious or downright morally atrocious behaviour. Whereas the people who try their very hardest to do good in the world, and who act very heroically within their local communities, tend to live very small, if not meagre lives, and largely go unrecognised, unrewarded, and have their names lost to history. The binary story structure of heroes as winners and villains as losers in life falls to pieces in the real world, leaving people feeling resentful or hopeless or nihilistic. Why be good at all? Why care for others when bad behaviour seems to be rewarded, when the will of the majority who want peace and kindness is overruled by the powerful minority, whose ears shall be forever closed to the cries of the public? Morally bad behaviour, that which harms huge swathes of people, results in more money, more protection and more security for those who cast the fatal verdicts, and the more those with clean hands seem to suffer. Though this dilemma of nihilistic indifference to the world and resentfulness for the power structures at play may be helped by adopting a more ancient understanding of heroic narratives, particularly the Greek tragic play. So before I go into explaining all about Attic tragedy and how it can help the modern mind with suffering, I'd like to take a brief moment to thank today's sponsor, which is Hungry Minds. Now, today's video is actually technically sponsored by The Book, which is the ultimate guide to rebuilding civilization. Imagine in a hypothetical apocalyptic world without the internet, most of us would lose access to modern and ancient knowledge. But the book preserves it, offering a rare insight into how the world actually works, from telephones and meteorology to medicine and agriculture, and even how to build a typewriter. Now, as someone who isn't particularly mechanically or scientifically minded, I've always really struggled to visualise how things work. So I've loved looking at this book, at these medieval style cross-section illustrations and the step-by-step explanations of devices like a mocha pot or brewing equipment. It's designed like a multi-layered interactive experience, almost like a physical rabbit hole, moving from, practical survival tips to cultural systems, all the way to hidden connections within the text, because yes, there is a secret puzzle woven throughout for readers to uncover as they read. Now, after becoming one of the top 2 Kickstarter campaigns in history and raising over $2.3 million, it is now a global bestseller. It is crafted entirely by hand with over 5,000 hours of work, and it features 400 plus pages, 180 topics and 23 chapters exploring the inventions that have shaped human history, and all of which has been fact-checked by experts. It's a perfect book for both technical and humanity readers, and as you can see, it makes a beautiful gift. So if you are interested, you can check out my link down below in the description box, and you will get 10% off your order using my code LibraryLady10. So the term Greek tragedy is rather inaccurate, as all the plays we have were produced within a short period and in one city, Athens, making them more accurately Attic tragedies. Now, we consider them classics today, but the plays of Sophocles, Aeschylus and Euripides were already considered classics by the 4th century, and they were reperformed all across Greece, taught in curriculums and learned by heart, although technically all of them were only produced to be performed once. Now, that single performance was part of the dramatic competition that dominated the festival, the Great Dionysia, a major religious festival in honour of the god Dionysus. This festival ran for 4 days at the end of February to the beginning of March, and between 14 and 16,000 people regularly attended the festival, primarily all of which were male citizens who were the head of the household and had the right to vote. Now, to put that into perspective, the only other occasions that had so many citizens collected in one place was either the Olympic Games or a major battle. Now, during this period of time, the theatre became a political spectacle, framed by rituals such as the opening, sacrifice and libation, conducted by the 10 most important military and political leaders of the state. There were several rituals and ceremonials conducted throughout the day, all primarily reflecting Athens' democratic commitment to war, the power of the city and the value of democratic citizenship. Yet interestingly, the plays that followed these ceremonies, both tragic and comedic, were not state-led propaganda pieces. They were plays that spoke to the society about society, offering a message of what a good city should be like and showcasing grim warnings of how things can go terribly wrong. Now, almost all the tragedies we have are about the other. They concern characters who are other than the citizens of Athens, from other places and other times. They are kings or monsters or women or foreigners. Now, the aim of the tragedy was to arouse pity and fear, cleansing the moral palate of Athenians and showcasing how to better control their reasoning and their own lives. As Simon Goldhill puts it, Greek democracy prided itself on its openness to questioning, and tragedy was the institution that staged this openness in the most startling fashion. Tragedies were morally complex accounts of how good people can end up in disastrous situations. Tragic heroes are neither wholly good nor wholly bad. They are moralistically grey, all making decisions that seem small or insignificant to themselves and even maybe the audience at the time, but evolve to have catastrophic consequences. Now, when one thinks of a tragic hero, one of the first that comes to mind is that of Oedipus. The story, very briefly, goes as follows. The king of Thebes once received prophecy that, were he to ever have a son, his son would kill him and then marry his widow, who would have been the son's mother. In another version of the myth, he is told that the city of Thebes would be saved if he fathered no children. Naturally horrified by the prospect, King Laius vows to never father any children, until one night when he gets drunk and impregnates his wife, Jocasta. Now, when their son Laades is born, the king orders a shepherd to take the baby into the mountains to die. However, the shepherd feels incredibly sorry for the newborn and instead hands him over to the childless king and queen of Corinth to raise. There he is named Oedipus and raised as a prince of Corinth. Though many years later, as a young man, Oedipus hears rumours that he is not the son of the king and queen of Corinth, and thus travels to the oracle of Delphi in the hopes of finding out his parentage. But the oracle doesn't tell him what he wants. Instead, it prophesies that Oedipus will kill his father and marry his mother. Now, this is where things go terribly wrong, for he didn't quite put 2 and 2 together, did he? Because at that moment, he completely forgets he was second-guessing his parentage at Corinth, and not wanting to fulfill the prophecy, he flees Corinth to Thebes. Now, on his way to Thebes, he crosses a man who happens to be King Laius, who is on his way to Delphi, for he heard a horrible rumour that his son may return to kill him, and he wanted clarification that his son was long dead. Now, he and Oedipus are riding in chariots, and when they cross paths, they have a dispute over whose chariot has right of way. In an act of what can only be deemed as hyper-violent overreaction, Oedipus kills King Laius, his father, and all of his men, and then carries on to Thebes. When he arrives at Thebes, he confronts the Sphinx that is terrorising the city and defeats her by solving her riddle and winning the throne. There, he marries the beautiful, newly widowed Queen Jocasta, who unfortunately just so happens to be his biological mother, and thus fulfills the disturbing prophecy that drove him away from home in the first place. Now, there is no denying that Oedipus knew of the curse. When he was travelling, he meets a man who looks remarkably like him, something which Jocasta later inadvertently admits upon seeing him in the play, and given the uncertainty of his parentage, followed by a prophecy warning him that he will kill his father, you think he'd be a tad more wary of turning to lethal road rage. But the core of tragedy is that the hero knows and simultaneously does not know, and in that paradox they find themselves paralysed and unsure of how to act. Now, in his book Tragedy, the Greeks and Us, Simon Critchley introduces tragedy to the reader as that which showcases all that is fragile and perishable in the world. Tragedy, he explains, is the imitation of action, mimesis of praxis, in which each of the core characters finds themselves disorientated by their circumstances. All are lost, unsure of how to act, a brutally ironic position to be in, particularly considering plays rely on acting. Instead, the characters find themselves compelled to follow suffering, and are left asking questions such as, what will happen to me? How can I choose the right path? And what should I do? As Critchley explains, tragedy is thinking in action, thinking upon action, and for the sake of action. Action, that which we would expect to see when watching a play, occurs entirely off stage and delivered to the audience via a messenger or a chorus. In Attic tragedy, the hero is never the solution to the problem. Unfortunately, they are the problem. Each hero is complicit in the disaster that destroys them, and that is because tragedy enacts misfortunes we unknowingly collude with fate. Oedipus knew his fate from the get-go, and he was told what would happen, but he refused to hear what was said, so much so that the blind prophet Tiresias mocks him for his willful blindness and deafness to the fate he is told. Greek tragedy forces all those watching the play to confront the reality that they too can play the biggest role in their struggles and downfall. We all play a role in the outcome of events, no matter how small and insignificant they may seem to us at the time. Now, tragic plays are steeped in reality. More than half of the surviving Greek tragedies were composed after the outbreak of the Peloponnesian Wars in 431 BCE. Oedipus the King was performed 2 years after the beginning of the war, and at a time when a plague had killed roughly 1/4 of the Athenian population. The plague in the play is very likely a reference to the real one, which would kill Pericles, the leader of Athens, later that year in 492 BCE. What's also notable are the number of plays about the aftermath of the Trojan War, focusing on combat veterans, and remind ourselves that many of the actors of these plays would have been combat veterans themselves and performed for an audience who had also experienced the war, either directly or indirectly. As such, none of us will ever truly experience Attic tragedy the way it was intended, for its purpose and experience is completely unique and confined to a people and culture 24 centuries ago. The idea of Attic tragedy we comprehend, the one that we read and may even watch performed, is one filtered through the more modern concept of literature. Yet, as Critchley says, in a world defined by relentless speed, cultural amnesia, and the thirst for short-term future allegedly guaranteed through the worshipping of the prosthetic gods of technology, tragedy is a way of applying the emergency brake. But in what way? How could tragic plays help the modern reader apply the emergency brake to an experience of life which feels as though it is far too out of control for any action we take in our daily lives to truly matter? Well, tragedy, Critchley argues, slows things down by confronting us with what we don't know about ourselves, an unknown force that unleashes violent effects on us on a minute-by-minute basis. We might think we are through with the past, but the past is never really through with us. We carry the past with us in every moment of our lives, from regrets to small and large traumas, embarrassing moments, life decisions from what subjects we studied to what careers we pursued, who we tied our lives to and who we let go. And any of those small decisions that we made long ago could one day be our undoing. For example, a decision to move cities to pursue a new career may result in you never falling in love and marrying, for the love of your life resided in a town that you left but never got the chance to meet. The holiday that you take one summer may result in you being robbed or falling fatally ill, incidents that would never have happened had you decided to go to a different destination or stay at home altogether. The job that you took at, say, a bank may have offered you a greater income than you would ever have had you decided to pursue your career as an artist, but your large income and work environment may lead you down a gambling problem or a dependency on alcohol that will cut your life short. Yet, as much as there is a likelihood of bad things happening from the decisions we make, there is always the same probability of good fortune emerging from you making a decision you almost didn't. The career in a new city may offer you the opportunity to adopt a dog who would become your greatest friend and companion that you will have throughout the entirety of your life. The holiday that you take may result in you meeting the love of your life, and that city and country becomes your new home. And the job that you took that gave you higher income but makes you miserable may be the only way that you will afford the opportunity to pay for cancer treatment that saves your life. This is what the ancients called fate, and through tragedy, the audience is forced to counter their urge to judge and moralise others, for tragedy highlights how easy it is for a person to make a disastrous mistake or an error of judgment. Likewise, the audience is left feeling hyper-aware of their vulnerability to the course of fate, and as such should never be quick to admire the successful or judge the unfortunate, for we are all equally susceptible to the turning of the tides. Unlike tragedy, we do not have seers and prophecies to guide us, only our own reason and logic, which shall forever be limited in comparison to the infinite ways life can unfold around us. Every decision we make can be as disastrous to us as it could be fortunate. There is no possible way of knowing. But the true tragedy of life is not the inevitable pain, suffering, and oppression that is inherent in the world that we live in, but in the nihilistic belief that all action is equally pointless. To respond to the pain of the modern world with apathy, selfishness, indifference, or excessive caution is to play your part in the world entirely as a negative entity, thus contributing to the disasters that befall the world as a whole. The societies we live in did not grow from indifference, passivity, or from those who never took risks, and the most remarkable shimmers of hope emanate from those who do the exact opposite. It comes from those who accept that life has its faults and cruelty, but they, as an individual, will not play their part in such a system, and even when misfortune befalls them, they are hopeful that they have accumulated enough like-minded people around them to inspire them to aid. We are collectively responsible for the state of affairs, even in minute ways, from what and where we purchase to how conscientious we are about the environment, how friendly we are to strangers, how and when we vote, and how receptive we are to our neighbours or a difference of opinion. Tragedy holds the mirror up to the audience and reminds them of their fragility in life, but also inspires their sensibilities to do better, to think more rationally and to act more measured and kindly, and to respond overall with more hope. Thank you ever so much for watching today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please consider giving it a like, maybe potentially sharing or subscribing to my channel. I hope you are doing well. If you have any requests for other videos you'd like me to cover, I have a little Google form in the description box down below where you can submit your requests. And thank you as always to my patrons for making this possible, and also for the book for sponsoring today's video. Again, if you're interested, I will leave my link down below where you can get 10% off using my discount code. Thank you as always for watching and supporting me, and I hope you are happy and healthy, and remember, books save lives, so keep reading.